I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here at the Hub Pavilion in Davos. Delighted now to be joined by Peggy Liu. She's the chairperson of JUCCCE. Thanks very much for coming to the Pavilion.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's very exciting to be here.
On Climate Deal Day. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing with JUCCCE and some of the projects you're working on. Especially I'm interested in some of the things you're doing with mayors in China.
Sure. Well, JUCCCE is a nonprofit, and we're based in China. We're trying to change the way China creates and uses energy. And so we focus on 4 key drivers of energy use: sustainable urbanization, industry, consumer behavior, and smart grid. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing with sustainable urbanization, since it's such a massive process that China is undergoing right now. You probably know that 350 million people are moving into cities over the next 20 years. So what's happening is we're building 2 New York cities in new floor space every year, not to mention the roads, the transport systems, the high-speed rail, etc. So what we want to do is jump ahead of this curve of building new cities and make sure that the mayors, really the kings of the kingdoms in China, understand how to look at urban planning through an energy lens, through a water lens, through a food security lens, and how this all comes together. So what we've done is we've partnered with the central ministries who are in charge of training mayors across China, and we're bringing in all sorts of experts from around the world to lecture them in Beijing.
And how does that work, just in terms of, if you can give me an example on when you've seen some international collaboration, for example, influence what actually happens in one of these areas?
Well, a great example actually is in the Smart Grid program, so it will sort of evolve into the next program. 3.5 years ago, when we started meeting with people who are in the utility space, and we asked the simple question of, do you know what smart grid is? Are you interested in rolling out smart grid in China? We would get the question, what is smart grid? Are you talking about electric vehicles? Because if so, that might be a little sci-fi for now. Why don't you come back in a few years? And of course, we're only 3.5, 4 years from that moment, and look where China is today. So the collaboration that JUCCCE facilitates is bringing in people like Duke Energy, the US DOE, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Nexent, Augmentum, IBM, and all these partners who know about smart grid, and bring them together face-to-face and create a comfort zone of dialogue to say, how can we roll out smart grid in China? Lo and behold, you might have heard that in May 2009, the State Grid, the largest utility in China, announced a rollout of smart grid across the country by 2020. That means $7.3 billion is being put behind this effort. And that is a great example of how an NGO, very tiny NGO like JUCCCE, can make great impact just by convening dialogue in a positive manner.
As you mentioned, or as I mentioned, I think, it's Climate Deal Day here at Hub Culture, and I know that you have a couple of things that you thought you're going to announce to us today, or at least one specific thing.
Well, one of the things that we realized in our work is that China needs access to technologies. There's no lack of interest to go green in China today. However, they don't really know how to go green. There's a big difference between A and B. So one of the things that we realized we had to do was reach out to multiple countries and bring in experts, bring in solution makers. And so we are trying to foster collaboration with international companies and countries and China. And so JUCCCE is really presenting the reason for these people to come and partner with China versus just think about China as a competitor. So one of the things that I like to tell people today is that China is rapidly changing from the factory of the world to the clean tech laboratory of the world. They're piloting and really throwing spaghetti on the wall. You know, electric vehicles, LED streetlights, low carbon cities.
Solar.
So, I mean, you can sort of go rainbow, A to Z, and they're just throwing against the wall, and whatever sticks, they can scale across the country really rapidly. However, let's go back to the initial question of how do they get access to the technologies. So one of the programs that we would like to launch today at Climate Deal Day is a new framework of looking at how US and China could collaborate on clean energy in a win-win manner. So what we are trying to do at JUCCCE is work with many partners to map the world of Chinese investors who want to invest in US university-based research to create jointly owned IP from the start. So why is this win-win? Well, you don't have this problem of IP, this IP thing. That's probably the #1 issue in clean tech with China. You have positive trade flows from China to the US in a non-controversial way. We're not buying resources. We're not buying a skyscraper in San Francisco. And you create jobs not only at the beginning, but downstream, upstream and downstream. The U.S. gets to really cement their leadership in innovation. And this is something that in the State of the Union, Obama really stressed is how can we keep innovation in the U.S.? And so these universities that are picked to be invested in, so to speak, the research, will really be cemented as leaders in those fields. Now the Chinese get access to technologies and they get to peek into the innovation process that the U.S. is so good at. And Chinese really have a lot to learn from. Now, the great thing about this is that China really knows how to scale. There's a whole, as Jim Rogers of Duke Energy likes to say, there's a whole IP in scaling. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's what China has or is building very rapidly right now. So as these research widgets come into play, what we can do is bring them to China and help it get to the commercialization faster. Right? And then everybody can win because it's jointly owned IP.
Got it. Peggy, I'm going to let you come and join Climate Deal Day out in the Hub Pavilion.
Thank
but thanks
you.
very much for coming and talking to us here in the Hub Pavilion. And I'm Edie Lush.